Be me, married to Cameron for 11 years. Met him at a community organizing event for affordable housing. He was there volunteering, setting up chairs, being generally useful. Not the most exciting guy, but stable, reliable, good job as an engineer. I was working as a program coordinator for a nonprofit focused on women's economic development. He asked me out. I figured, why not? Dated for 2 years, he proposed. Seemed like the right move. Marriage was fine. He worked long hours, brought home good money. I continued my work, got more involved with women's advocacy groups in the city, started attending rallies, joining committees, speaking at community centers about wage gaps and workplace discrimination. Cameron supported it all, never complained when I had evening meetings or weekend events. Even watched our first kid when she was born so I could keep doing my advocacy work. Emma, beautiful girl, born when I was 29. Cameron was obsessed with her, stayed up nights when she cried, changed diapers, the whole devoted dad thing. Honestly, kind of annoying how much he hovered sometimes. I loved Emma, but I also had important work to do. Cameron picked up extra freelance projects to pad our savings, said he wanted Emma to have everything. When Emma was 3, I got pregnant again. Cameron was thrilled. I was less so, but whatever. It happened. Sophie was born, another girl. Cameron somehow became even more devoted, if that was possible. Started this whole thing where he'd do special activities with each kid individually. Took Emma to the park every Saturday morning. Started a bedtime story routine with Sophie. Meanwhile, I'm organizing a major women's rights forum at the Civic Center, getting asked to speak on panels about reproductive health care access, leading workshops on financial independence for women. Cameron never once asked me to slow down or prioritize family stuff over my work, which was good because I wouldn't have anyway. My advocacy work was important, it mattered. I was helping women understand their power, their rights, their autonomy. Around the time Sophie turned 2, I started getting more recognition in local activist circles, invited to sit on a nonprofit board focused on women's shelter services, asked to help draft policy recommendations for city council on paid family leave. This was real impact, real change. Cameron just kept working, kept parenting, kept being Cameron. We had sex occasionally, usually when I initiated because I felt like I should. He never pressured me, never complained about frequency. Honestly, our marriage was more like a partnership than a romance, which I told myself was mature, evolved, better than some stupid passion-based relationship. Then I met Marcus at a city hall meeting about zoning for a new women's health clinic. He was a lawyer working pro bono for the clinic. Smart, articulate, actually understood the political theory I'd reference. We started getting coffee after meetings to discuss strategy. One thing led to another. I justified it easily enough. Cameron didn't intellectually stimulate me. He was a good provider and father, but we didn't connect on important issues. Marcus got it, got me, got why this work mattered. The affair lasted about 4 months. During that time, I got pregnant with our 3rd child. I knew there was a chance it wasn't Cameron's, but I couldn't exactly know for sure. Ended things with Marcus before I started showing. Told Cameron we were having another baby. He was predictably overjoyed. Took on even more freelance work to prepare for baby number 3. Started planning a nursery renovation, researching the best car seats. I felt a little guilty, but mostly just focused on my work. I was in the middle of organizing a major initiative on workplace harassment policies. Jack was born when Emma was 6 and Sophie was 3. Cameron literally cried holding him, his first son, went on about how blessed he was, how lucky, how he couldn't believe he got to be dad to 3 perfect kids. It was touching, I guess, if a bit much. He took 2 weeks off work, waited on me hand and foot during recovery, then went back to his routine of working constantly and being super dad. I recovered and dove back into my advocacy work. By this point, I was kind of known in local feminist circles, regularly speaking at events about gender equality and women's empowerment, wrote several op-eds for local papers about reproductive rights and economic justice, got appointed to a city commission on women's issues. At one of the commission meetings, I met David. He was a city administrator, separated from his wife. We started talking. He started texting. I knew I shouldn't, but Cameron was so boring. Every conversation was about the kids or household logistics or his work projects. He never wanted to discuss theory or politics or anything meaningful. David was different. He actually challenged me intellectually. We started an affair. This one lasted almost a year, overlapped with when I met James at a fundraiser for the women's shelter. James was exciting in a different way, more physical, less talking. I kept both going for a while. Neither knew about the other, or about Cameron, obviously. It felt like taking ownership of my own desire, my own autonomy. Wasn't I always telling other women to prioritize their own needs, to not let themselves be confined by patriarchal expectations of female monogamy? Cameron never suspected anything. He was always so trusting, so secure in our marriage, would tell people how lucky he was, how I was doing such important work, how proud he was of everything I accomplished. It was almost insulting how naive he was. Around the time Jack turned 1, I ended things with both David and James. It was getting complicated, hard to manage. I refocused on my marriage and my work. Cameron was still Cameron, devoted and reliable and present. Honestly, things were fine. Our partnership worked. He handled most of the parenting because his schedule was more flexible. I did the important work of being a public advocate for women. Emma was thriving in 2nd grade, Sophie in kindergarten, Jack growing fast. Cameron did all their drop-offs and pickups, packed lunches, helped with homework. I made it to school events when I could, but I had meetings, obligations. The other moms at school were kind of judgmental about it. But I refused to feel guilty for not conforming to traditional motherhood expectations. Cameron picked up all that slack anyway. He was basically room parent for all 3 kids. Then one Tuesday evening, Cameron came home from work early. I was in my office working on a presentation about pay equity. He knocked, came in, had this weird look on his face, sat down and said, "We need to talk." My stomach dropped, but I kept my face neutral. "I found something today," he said. Pulled out his phone, started showing me screenshots. My old phone, the one I thought I'd wiped before trading it in. He'd apparently taken it to get refurbished for Emma to use. Tech guy recovered deleted messages, messages with David, with James, with Marcus, explicit messages, planning meetups, talking about our encounters. My mind raced through possible explanations, considered denying it, saying they were faked, but the evidence was extensive, clearly real, so I pivoted to offense. "You went through my private messages? You invaded my privacy?" He just stared at me. "Sarah, you cheated on me. Multiple times. With multiple men." I launched into this whole thing about how marriage is a patriarchal institution designed to control female sexuality, how monogamy is a social construct that primarily benefits men, how I had every right to explore my own desires and autonomy. Cameron's face went from hurt to disgusted. "Are you seriously lecturing me with feminist theory right now? I'm telling you, I found proof you betrayed our marriage, and you're talking about social constructs." I told him he was being controlling, possessive, exhibiting toxic, masculine ownership behavior. He stood up, said, "I want a divorce." I actually laughed. Told him fine, he'd be paying child support for 3 kids on his engineer salary while I kept the house. Reminded him that family courts favor mothers. He just looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before. "We'll see about that," he said. Moved into the guest room that night. Next week, he filed for divorce. I wasn't worried, I had a lawyer friend from my advocacy work who took my case. She assured me that as primary caregiver, which was bullshit, Cameron did way more hands-on parenting, I'd get primary custody. Child support would be substantial given his income. I'd probably get the house, at least half his retirement accounts. Cameron could have his little divorce. I'd be fine. Better than fine. I'd have financial support without having to deal with his boring presence. Could actually live authentically, date people who stimulated me. Then Cameron's lawyer filed a motion requesting court-ordered paternity testing for all 3 children. I felt actual panic for the first time. My lawyer said we could fight it, but it might look suspicious. Better to just do it, she said. Probably he's just being vindictive, but it'll come back confirming they're his and make him look bad. Except I knew there was a real chance Jack wasn't his. Marcus and I hadn't been careful. Neither had Cameron during the time I got pregnant. Could be either of them. But Emma and Sophie were definitely Cameron's. Worst case scenario, one of 3 kids comes back negative. I could handle that. Frame it as Cameron being cruel to the children by even questioning. The test was ordered. We all got swabbed. Waiting for results was the longest 2 weeks of my life. Tried to stay focused on my work. Had a big speaking engagement about reproductive justice. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I pushed through. Cameron had moved out by this point, gotten an apartment, had the kids on a temporary custody schedule 50-50 until the divorce was finalized. When he had them, he was his normal, devoted dad self, according to the kids. When I had them, I was distracted, anxious, snapping at them. Results came back on a Thursday. My lawyer called me, asked me to come to her office. Her voice sounded weird. I went in, she had the papers on her desk. Her face was serious, professional, but I could see something else there. Judgment, maybe. "Sarah, I need you to look at these results." She slid the papers across. Child 1, Emma, 8 years old, 0% probability of paternity. My vision blurred. Child 2, Sophie, 5 years old, 0% probability of paternity. My hand started shaking. Child 3, Jack, 2 years old, 0% probability of paternity, 0%. All 3. None of them were Cameron's. I couldn't process it. Emma, I'd been so sure was his. She looked like his mom. Sophie had his mannerisms. Everyone said so. But the genetics don't lie. 0% probability means exclusion, means impossible. Meant I'd gotten pregnant by affair partners 3 separate times. Meant my entire marriage was built on a lie. Meant Cameron had raised 3 children for years that weren't biologically his. My lawyer was talking something about how this changed everything, about how this was potentially paternity fraud, about how I could face legal consequences beyond the divorce, about how Cameron's lawyer would destroy me with this. I asked what our options were. She said honestly, not many. I could try to argue that it doesn't matter, that Cameron was the father in all ways that mattered through his actions. But the betrayal was so extensive, so prolonged, so complete. No judge would look kindly on it. Custody would almost certainly go primarily to him. Child support would flip. I'd be paying him. Asset division would favor him given the fraud. I might even have to pay back child support he'd paid, or lose claims to any of his benefits. And that's if I avoided criminal charges. Some states were starting to prosecute paternity fraud. I felt sick, asked if Cameron knew yet. She said yes, his lawyer would have gotten the same results. I drove home in a daze. My phone started ringing. My mom didn't answer. Then my sister. Then my best friend from the Women's Advocacy Board. Someone had already started talking. I got home. There were texts coming in. My mom, please tell me what I'm hearing isn't true. My sister, how could you do this to Cameron, to those kids? My friend, Sarah, people are asking me about some test results. What's going on? Apparently Cameron's family knew, and they were not being quiet about it. Within 24 hours, it had spread through my whole social circle. The women's advocacy community I'd been so active in, they all knew. I tried to control the narrative. Posted on social media about how genetics don't determine parenthood, about how this was a private family matter, about how the patriarchal obsession with bloodlines and biological lineage was harmful, about how real parenting is shown through action and presence. The response was not what I expected. Women I'd worked with for years were commenting things like, "But you lied to him for over a decade." People pointing out the difference between choosing alternative family structures versus deception. Someone wrote, "You lectured us all about consent and honesty while lying to your husband about the paternity of his children." The nonprofit board I sat on asked me to resign. The City Commission on Women's Issues quietly removed me. My employer, the Women's Economic Development nonprofit, put me on administrative leave, pending review of how this situation might impact our organizational reputation. My speaking engagement got canceled. 3 more events I'd been scheduled for uninvited me. My lawyer friend from advocacy work stopped returning my calls. The custody hearing was brutal. Cameron's lawyer painted me as a serial cheater who'd perpetrated fraud for years, brought up every time Cameron had taken extra work to support our family, every diaper he'd changed, every school event he'd attended, every sacrifice he'd made for children he believed were his. My lawyer tried to argue that I'd been a good mother, that the children loved me, that disrupting their stability would harm them. Cameron's lawyer countered with my work schedule, my frequent absences for advocacy work, the fact that Cameron had been primary parent despite working full-time, brought testimony from the kids' teachers about how Cameron was always the one involved. Then they brought up the affairs themselves. Marcus testified, said I'd told him I was separated from my husband. David testified, similar story, said I'd implied I was divorced. James declined to testify, but his deposition was entered. I looked like exactly what I was, a serial liar who'd manipulated everyone around me. The judge was a woman, which I'd initially thought might help. It did not help. She looked at me with pure contempt when delivering her ruling. Primary physical custody to Cameron. I got alternating weekends and 1 evening per week. Child support set at a rate that would take almost 40% of my income. I was also ordered to contribute to their college funds. Asset division heavily favored Cameron. He got the house, most of the retirement accounts, the newer car. I got to keep my personal possessions and my old sedan. The judge stopped short of ordering me to pay back past child support, but made it clear she'd considered it. Also mentioned that she was referring the case to the DA's office for potential fraud charges. I walked out of that courtroom destroyed, lost my job officially the next week. The nonprofit said my continued employment was incompatible with our mission of empowering women through integrity and trust. My mom called, said she was ashamed, said Cameron had been nothing but good to me, and I'd thrown it away, said those children adored their father, and I'd built their entire lives on lies. My sister sent a long text about how she'd looked up to my marriage, how she'd thought Cameron and I had something real, how disgusted she was to learn the truth. My dad didn't call at all. My brother-in-law blocked me on social media. Friends from college started distancing themselves. People I'd known for years suddenly had no time for coffee or calls. The feminist community I'd been so active in completely iced me out. No one would publicly defend me. A few people I thought were close friends posted vague things about how feminism requires honesty and accountability, about how weaponizing feminist language to excuse harmful behavior damages the movement. I tried to get involved with a different advocacy group in a neighboring city. They'd heard about me, said they weren't interested. I applied for jobs. My reputation preceded me. Finally got a position doing administrative work at a small company, paid half what I'd made before. Between that and child support, I could barely afford a 1-bedroom apartment. Had to sell most of my nice stuff to cover moving costs and legal fees. The worst part was the kids. When they came for my weekend visits, they were polite but distant. Emma, at 8, was old enough to understand some of what happened. She asked me once if I'd lied to Daddy. I tried to explain that adult relationships are complicated. She just looked at me and said, "That sounds like yes." Sophie was confused, kept asking when we were going back to our real house. Jack was only 2, he adjusted the fastest, but he clearly preferred being with Cameron. Would cry when I dropped him off back with Cameron, but it was relief crying. Like he was glad to be back where he felt secure. Cameron, to his credit, never badmouthed me to the kids. His lawyer had apparently advised him to take the high road. He facilitated the custody exchanges politely, kept communication brief and civil. But I could see in his eyes what he thought of me. The love and trust that used to be there was completely dead, replaced with nothing. Just cold practicality. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I saw on social media that he was dating. a teacher at Sophie's school. Apparently, they'd met at a parent event. She seemed nice. The kids apparently liked her. I felt a rage I couldn't articulate. How dare he move on so easily while my life was destroyed? I posted something passive-aggressive about men's ability to just replace their families. Got absolutely dragged in the comments. People I didn't even know commenting about the audacity. Deleted it within an hour, but screenshots had already spread. My ex-lawyer called, said Cameron's lawyer had contacted her. If I posted anything else about Cameron or his personal life, they'd pursue harassment charges. I needed to shut up and stay in my lane. A year out from the divorce, I barely recognized my life. Tiny apartment, low-paying job, minimal contact with my kids, no social circle, family barely spoke to me. All my advocacy work, my reputation, my connections, gone. I tried to date, but it always came up eventually. Men would ask about my kids, about my divorce. When the truth came out, they'd ghost immediately. One guy told me before he left that what I'd done was unforgivable, that I'd wasted years of a good man's life and betrayed innocent children. I tried to argue my perspective, and he literally laughed at me, said I was still trying to justify the unjustifiable. I started seeing a therapist, tried to work through everything that happened. She kept pushing me to take accountability, to examine my choices and their impacts. I kept trying to explain the context, the marriage dynamics, the feminist framework. She finally said something that stuck with me. Sarah, you can theorize all you want, but at the end of the day, you lied to someone who trusted you completely. You let him raise children he believed were his. You prioritized your desires over everyone else's well-being. That's not feminism. That's just selfishness. I stopped seeing her after that. 2 years later, Cameron married the teacher. The kids were in the wedding. Emma was a junior bridesmaid. They all looked happy in the photos I definitely didn't obsessively examine. Cameron had gotten a promotion, they'd bought a bigger house, had a guest room for when the kids stayed, which was most of the time. I'd tried to push for more custody, but the kids themselves had asked to stay with their dad. The judge had actually interviewed them and honored their wishes. I saw them every other weekend, briefly. They were polite, distant, going through the motions. Emma was 11 now. She'd started asking questions about her biological father. I didn't have good answers. I'd never actually confirmed which affair partner was which child's father. Honestly, didn't want to know. My life had stabilized into a kind of quiet misery. Work, home, occasional awkward visits with my children, no friends, no community, no purpose. I'd lost everything. Sometimes I'd see posts about women's rights events in the city, events I used to speak at, causes I used to champion. Now I wasn't even invited to attend, let alone speak. My name had become a cautionary tale in local feminist circles, proof that the movement needed to hold its own accountable, that living your values actually mattered. I'd scroll through old photos sometimes, back when Emma was a baby, when Cameron would look at me with such love, when I had a career I was proud of and a community I belonged to, before I destroyed it all. People asked me sometimes if I regretted it. The affairs, the lies, all of it. I'd start to answer with some theoretical framework about agency and choice, but honestly, late at night in my shitty apartment, alone because everyone who ever mattered had left. Yeah, I regretted it. I'd had a husband who loved me, supported my work, was a devoted father. I'd had 3 beautiful children who needed me. I'd had a career making real impact, a community that valued my contributions. I'd had a life that actually meant something, and I'd thrown it all away. For what? Some excitement, some validation, some illusion of autonomy. Now Cameron had the kids, the house, the career, the respect. He'd moved on, found happiness again, built a better life from the ashes of what I destroyed. And I had nothing, no family, no friends, no reputation, no purpose, just the echoes of feminist theory I'd used to justify destroying the best thing I ever had. I was the villain in my own story, and unlike the narratives I used to preach, there was no empowerment in this ending, just consequences, just the life I'd built for myself through a decade of lies.